Disclaimer: the following piece contains descriptions of a near-death experience, mental health struggles, and suicidal ideation. Readers and listeners who are sensitive to these topics are advised to proceed with caution. The views expressed are my personal experiences and are meant to foster conversation, not clinical guidance. If you or anyone you know is struggling, please reach out to a mental health professional or crisis hotline. For Kenya, use Befrienders Kenya +254 722 178 177 or the Kenya Red Cross 1199. Despite several attempts to kill myself, I've only ever come close once. It was while on a class trip to Mombasa. We were just about to finish our last semester. This was one of the last times I would ever get to spend time with my classmates. I really struggled to find community in that class. I hated that I landed there. I hated that I didn't get a higher grade. I hated that my friends from high school got into bigger and better places, and there I was, in a horribly mismanaged university, bad infrastructure, incompetent staff, doing a course I didn't really care about. I felt like I had landed there out of trickery. The bearded man upstairs conspired against me. In reality, I wouldn't really say I failed or anything like that. I just chose wrong. Because when you hear the name of my university, you don't picture what it actually looks like. It's a massive plot of land, but somehow the school is tiny and run down. The lecturers miss classes if they even bother to come. And why would they? They haven't been paid in 3 semesters. They'd rather go to the University of Nairobi or Kenyatta University. Those were respectable schools, at least. If I have 2 classes on the same day, an hour apart, one in UN and one here, I'm going to UN. At least there, I might get paid. One lecturer told us. Imagine seeing your lecturer for the first time 2 weeks before your exam. Imagine never seeing your lecturer. That was our reality, and it happened so many times with so many classes, it was impossible to stay motivated. Exam periods were 2 weeks where the whole school was shitting themselves. Anyway, I distanced myself from my classmates because I didn't feel like I belonged. Whenever this small circle of friends in my class wanted to do something, which was usually just getting drunk, I always had an excuse. I'd just say I didn't want to go, or I'd just blow them off. It was rude, but it was my coping mechanism. I had 2 different friend groups and they didn't necessarily need to meet. Very few people in my class really got to know me. And now that it was all about to come to an end, I felt sorry that I'd held on to the past with such a grip. We got to Airbnb in Bamuri Mtambo. The girls would sleep in the main bedroom while the guys would sleep in the second bedroom. It was a really nice house, pretty big too. We had a balcony, kitchen amenities, a big TV, a sound system, all that stuff. We were all living in hostels and bedsitters at the time, so it was a huge upgrade. The second day we were there, we had to find our own way of getting to Kemfree because the bus had left us behind. And none of us even knew our way around. It was crazy. Everyone got mad at each other. We got separated and ended up spending so much money because the locals could tell we weren't from there. Plus, it rained pretty much the whole day, so we never even got to go to the beach. But in the cheap liquor, in the 60 fingers scooping and chomping on a single massive ugali, in the smoke of either controlled substances or sukuma wiki someone had forgotten was in the cooker, we made memories through the proximity we'd never had in the 4 years we'd known each other. Even I got caught up. On someone's phone, a recording of me drunk out of my mind talking about some bullshit or throwing up in the bathroom. The room spinning. On one of the last days we were there, we finally got to go to the beach. It was a cold day. Dark clouds covered the sky and a sharp, numbing breeze blew on my weak, famished and hungover body. My feet had never touched the ocean water, so I was excited. I didn't know how to swim, so I wasn't going to attempt it. But I was in swimming trunks already, so it seemed like a waste if I never even tried. A member of this small circle, picture 5'4" Coleman Domingo with an afro. got afloat and I decided to follow suit. As soon as my skin pierced the water, the nerves on my feet screamed in pure agony. My jaw clenched in response. I shivered as goosebumps formed on my skin, and the sand on my legs was washed away. The branches and leaves in the water squelched and crumpled up under my feet as I walked. The current blew on my motion, pushing me sideways, but I walked. The water came up to my knees, but I walked. I walked, telling my friend that this was far enough, but he didn't really say anything. He just kept walking. The water was almost up to my waist. It was at this point that I started to get scared. I could feel it pulling me. We tried to get on our floaters, but at every attempt, the current would pull me in and I couldn't get on. After several attempts and help from my friend, I finally started floating. I always thought floating on water was a relaxing experience, but I didn't really like it. I didn't like feeling like there was nothing beneath me. Being at the mercy of the current, it was unsettling, unnatural. I didn't even like sitting on the floater. It made my back cramp. But somehow, I kept my composure. The current started pulling us further and further into the ocean. Pretty soon, all I could hear was the sound of the water as it pulled us further. I wanted to turn back, go back to the beach, back to safety, but I didn't know how to. I was at the mercy of the current after all, wasn't I? And Mother Earth wanted to pull us further into her. This whole time, I hadn't communicated how terrified I was to my friend. The yellow eyes of panic were staring dead at me. He was panting, slobbering and drooling, just waiting. My friend seemed to be having fun, so I didn't want to ruin it. I also didn't want to look like a scaredy cat. But now I wanted to turn around, but I couldn't get off my floater. I asked him how, and he just did it. He got off and stood up. But when I tried, the current pulled me under with incredible strength. All my life, I have never felt so merciless. Like a baby, rolling with a bodybuilder. I tried to stand up like 5 or 6 more times, but every time, I only got pulled deeper. Every time I tried, for a split second, I managed to get up, but I would immediately feel dizzy and fall back into the water. I've heard that when people drown, they look like they're choosing to go under, intentionally trying to make themselves sink. I wondered how I looked. The horizon was horizontal, then vertical, then horizontal again, then slanted, then vertical, then upside down and over again. At some point, I gave up trying to stand up and tried to get to my friend, tried to get him to help me stand up. I had tried to seem calm this whole time, tried to be cool and relaxed. I knew that if I panicked, I would only make it worse. But now I was trying to yell, struggling to breathe. Panic was no longer staring at me from the window. He had shattered my door and was now in my fridge, eating all my food. My right hand was outstretched as my left was under. My fingers straight out like they were trying to grip the ends of the earth. Water got into my ears, my eyes, my mouth. Tasted terrible, a mix of salt and body odor. Of who? Mine, the ocean, or Mother Earth? I couldn't tell you. But somehow, he finally got to me, grabbed my hand and yanked me up. But I was still dizzy. My body almost slammed both of us into the water. But he kept strong and stood us up. He had to hold my hand and guide me all the way back to the beach. My classmates saw us, started laughing, thinking we were reenacting some kind of gay fantasy. When we got back to the beach, I sat on a plastic chair trying to calm down. The terror had infested me. I couldn't even cry. I just sat there, staring off into the distance, the 1,000-yard stare. The feel of the plastic chair, the wet sand at my feet, my now wet shorts, the quietness in my mind, the loudness in my surroundings. My classmates talking about what they wanted to eat that night or where they were going clubbing. The deafening roar of the ocean, the cry of the wind. I sat there in safety, but it felt like I could just perforate through the chair and land myself back into the water. You know that episode of Adventure Time where Finn is scared of the ocean? The water turns blood red every time he approaches. His body physically repels the water. He just can't overcome the terror. That was me. I felt so violated. In fact, when my friends went drinking that night, I insisted on going back to the Airbnb. I walked home alone. When I would close my eyes, my body went back into the water. The horror. I couldn't just sit down. I couldn't lie in bed. I couldn't even fall asleep. For a split second, I had peeked into the other side, and it was horrifying. While on the bus, on the way home, I would feel like I was floating in the water all over again, and I couldn't handle it. A childhood friend of mine had killed herself a few months before. A friend that had been a hand to hold when I was a teenager. Scared, depressed, suicidal. When I ran away from home, when everyone told me I was stupid for putting myself in danger, she was the only one who told me it was okay, because she understood. She died. I hadn't seen or spoken to her in years. When I sat on that bus and closed my eyes only to be swept away by the current, I thought of her. I wondered, is this how she felt? Is this what it was like to die? How alone was she? I wished, in her pain, I could reach out to her, let her know that she was understood. But no, she was gone. In that bus, I shed so many tears. I could have drowned. Rest in peace, Janet.